cast your mind back to Australia 2016 and that abysmal qualifying session we had to kick off the opening round of the 2016 season. Lewis Hamilton got pole position that day and was walking around with his helmet off in the paddock 7 minutes before the session had actually finished. Obviously there's no point running 7 minutes because he already had pole because of the elimination. And that was just horrible. Of course, it was changed the next round. And since then, we have just reverted to Q1, Q2, Q3, normal qualifying system. Now, if you have been to a race weekend or you've just been watching it on the TV, qualifying is enjoyable and it is a very, very, very important part of the weekend. Monaco, for example, they say that the weekend is 95% done. I know it sounds a bit crap for people watching it, but they say that the weekend is 95% done on the Saturday. You put in a fastest lap around Monaco and then that's it, your pole position, very little overtaking happens around Monaco. So it's really, really important, of course. In watching it a race weekend, I'd say is quite fun. Obviously, me and Jordan have been to quite a few, and so you guys probably have been to a few as well. So it is good to see. A few races ago at the Monza Grand Prix in Italy, the Italian Grand Prix in Monza rather, a bit of a strange ending to Q3 occurred. Of course, we all remember what happened. All the cars, including Charles Leclerc and all these people, bunched up at the end of Q3 wanting to get a fastest lap in the 2 minutes that they had left. Obviously, the tour, they were all trying to get tours off each other's teammates. It was pointless, it was stupid. We're not going to go into that, but basically since then, after 8 cars left the pit lane, only 1 car, which is Carlos Sainz, actually managed to do a fastest lap. Didn't get on pole, mind, which we were all rooting for him to do. Something had to be done about qualifying, because that is stupid. I mean, of course, we all know that that's what drivers do. They said 3 laps, out lap, fastest lap, and in lap, come back into the garage, go over the telemetry, wait till about 3 minutes beforehand, all go out at the same time, or mainly around the same time, then set an out lap when they've got enough time, try to cross the line about 20 seconds to go, set a fastest lap. We're all on the edge of our seats. Obviously, whatever time they set, nobody or very little people can beat that, obviously minimising the time of who can actually beat that, and just the in lap that is ran outside of qualifying time. So in Q3, you're probably going to see at least 6 laps from the car. They all sit in the garage. There was obviously a little bit of a lull, and we all expect that, but in Monza it just got a very, very stupid time, and as I say, only 1 car out of about 8 or 9 actually made it. So since then, there's been some changes in the FIA. What can we do? What can we do to A, spice qualifying up, and B, of course, stop that happening again? Now, since the interim between Spain and, of course, the previous round that's just ran in Suzuka, we've had some great qualifying where Ferrari have just been like, wow, unbelievable. Lewis Hamilton was the talk of the town for the past few years, setting records left, right and centre. Ayrton Senna's, Michael Schumacher's, going for obviously the all-time pole position record holder, and dominating the first part of the season, and then now it's been Ferrari. But nevertheless, we're still having a bit of work done in the back. So now that this new rule, or this new kind of implementation for next year has come about, basically for a Formula 1 sprint race. Now, there's been a lot of talk about having a sprint race. A lot of people, a lot of YouTubers have said that in the past, but meaning just for kind of more spice in terms of the race, a bit like what Formula 2 do, because as you know, Formula 2 still have a qualifying session as well. So they have a qualifying session. Later that day, they have the feature race, I believe, and then it's a sprint race, or vice versa, but 2 races. So the sprint race, or the qualifying race, as a lot of people are calling it, for Formula 1, basically what it's going to work is, it will be a shortened and determined lap amount to set the grid for the Sunday. So the drivers will line up in reverse grid order from the World Championship standards, and they will race around the circuit like a normal race. See, the determined laps will be put by the FIA on that weekend. Of course, it will be less than the actual race because, what would be the point of racing the laps? My guess is it would be around 40%. So, for example, if we're looking at, the only one I can think of, let's say, I'm just thinking of Abu Dhabi. So, for example, let's say Abu Dhabi. 55 laps in Abu Dhabi, 40% is about 20 laps. I think 20 laps would be fine. So 20 laps of going around the track fast as I can, just like a normal mini sprint race. But of course, the big thing about this was it would be in reverse grid order. So as it stands, George Russell would be at the front. He would be on pole position, so well done, George. And Lewis Hamilton would be at the back of the grid. They would race away for 20 laps. The idea would be that hopefully George Russell could hold it at the front. Hopefully Lewis could pull his way from the back to, get up to the position that he wants to start on Sunday. And of course, whoever crosses the line at lap 20 or whatever lap will be the pole sitter. So for example, as I've just said there, George Russell will be on P1, Robert Kubica would be on P2, and it would go back to reverse in order. So the main guys, obviously, as I said, Lewis Hamilton, you know, the guy who's got the most points, the one who, of course, if he gets on pole position, he's just going to storm away, would have a challenge on his hands. And of course, George Russell and everyone and Williams would be saying, you know, can he actually hold it? Can he hold everyone behind and, you know, put himself in good position for tomorrow's race? Because, I mean, he's probably not going to end up on pole position. But if he can, you know, only fall back like 10 positions, which I know that sounds loads, but remember, George Russell falls back 10 positions. That's P10. That is so good. That's as high as that will be his highest qualifying position. Of course, open the floodgates up for more points and things like that. So that's the FIA's idea. It's been chucked around loads. It's kind of been put on a little bit of the back foot, of course, after the last few races. You know, focusing on Mercedes and their 6-time constructor, obviously going for that, and of course Lewis and things like that. But it's finally come about. April the 30th was when the decision was made, and in the last few days the teams have actually been at a bit of a tribunal deciding on the decision. I think the FIA held a kind of, a bit of like a tribunal kind of thing in their main headquarters in Paris, and that decision was made to trial it for 2020. Now, of course, this qualifying system is want to be put in place for 2021, but of course they need a bit of an alpha test, and that's what's going to be next year. So what it is implemented at the moment is for 3 races: the French Grand Prix at Paul Ricard, which is round 8, I believe, the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa-Francorchamps, obviously the first round after the summer break, and the Russian Grand Prix at the Sochi Autodrome will be the trial for these things. So obviously, if you're going to a race that's not that, like Spain or Britain or anything like that, you will obviously see Q1, Q2 and Q3. But if you're going to Paul Ricard, Spa or Sochi, you will see, at the moment obviously, you will see the qualifying race, the sprint race. So as I've just said, that's how it'll happen. 20 or so laps, as determined by the FIA, with, as it stands, George Russell on pole position, Lewis Hamilton at the back of the grid, and they will race it out. Wheel-to-wheel action, I mean, possibly, I'll get on a little bit about explaining about, you know, how the race might pan out if that happens, but it should be 20 laps or whatever of, you know, wheel-to-wheel racing, proper racing, as Lewis tries to close away from the back, George tries to hold his position at the front, and of course, as I've just said there, you know, whoever crosses the line will be on pole position. Now, that's going to be trialled for next year, which, in my personal opinion, I'm very, very excited about. That's going to be so good. Now, when the original qualifying system came into play, well, firstly, me and Jordan were just talking about it. We weren't actually on YouTube at that point. I think we weren't that excited about it, but we were like, okay, we'll give it a chance. For example, like, I don't think they do it in other forms of motorsport, but there's like games, there's Xbox games, video games, for example, where they do eliminations. So it sounded fun. I was like, you know, let's do it. Formula One likes to try, you know, quirky things now and then, so let's give it a go. It went obviously terrible, and they reverted back to normal. So firstly, they've got that, you know, to fall back on. If it goes badly, they can go back to the normal. It's only 3 races out of 22 for next year. Remember, we've got 2 more as well, so technically they're only like testing for 1 race out of this season, if that makes sense. You know, 3 races out of 22 is nothing. So if it like goes terrible in, you know, France, you might be thinking, well, God, Belgium, whoever's going to Belgium or the Belgian Grand Prix is going to be ruined unless they change it. But then it doesn't really matter because it's only 1 race. And then again, after Belgium, if Belgium's like, you know, okay, then you've got Monza and then Singapore, where you've got the normal qualifying session, and then Sochi, which might be a bit of a, I don't really want to do this anymore. So 3 races, they're only trialling out, which is perfect. Remember, they didn't do that for Australia. You know, they just jumped straight into it. It was decided at the end of the 2015 season, or midway through the 2015 season, wasn't given a trial, or wasn't given a big trial as it deserved, like on a race weekend, and then it was implemented in Australia. No real kind of, you know, not really getting ready for it. No one knew what to expect. But as I say, thankfully they decided after round 1 that it was not going to stay for the rest of the season, because me and Jordan were worrying that it was going to be, you know, it was going to happen throughout, and we were actually going to be sitting here still doing that, you know, quite bad elimination. So yeah, Formula 1 did make a good decision there. So as I said, you know, 3 races, that's where the test now is not actually that bad. But I think that this is going to be great, because, I mean, as I've just said there, you know, George Russell, I'm sorry I'm picking on George, but, you know, he is at the back at the moment. So George Russell, you know, he obviously is at the back of the grid, so he would start on pole position P1. Firstly, for him, I think that would be great, because I know it's only a moral win, you know, he's not really on pole position. Obviously, he'd be at the front of the grid, in front of the, behind the safety car and behind the trophy, and obviously in front of the first car, in front of the lights. He'll feel all, you know, $1 million, and he'll think back to his Formula 2 days. But that being said, at the moment with Williams, like when's the next chance Williams are actually going to get to be on pole position? And their last pole was, I believe, 2014 Austria. So, you know what I mean? Like, they'd actually be on pole position. And this isn't a gimmick, so they would actually be on pole for the qualifying. And it would actually make them, be excited for a race weekend, because they're probably sitting back home and thinking, well, obviously, yeah, they're in Formula 1, fantastic, but they're at the back of the grid. They only have 1 point between two drivers. So to have this pole position and to have Williams on pole and a Williams 1-2 nevertheless, because obviously Kubica in 19th, will just give Williams such a boost, because they'll finally be back at the front of the grid. They'll have a race where they'll start at the front of the grid. Let's say that the lead after the first lap. So for the Williams, that would be such a boost. Also for Lewis Hamilton, Sebastian Vettel, Valtteri Bottas, Max Verstappen, all these guys who, as I say, they've never really had a test where they've had to come from the back of the grid. Obviously, I know a few people have. For example, Lewis Hamilton in 2012 Spain, he was excluded from qualifying. Sebastian Vettel, 2012 Abu Dhabi, again, he was excluded. I don't know if it was at the back of the pit lane, but he had to fight his way through. And obviously, he made an amazing third position in that race, one of my favourite races by Sebastian Vettel. So they've never really had a chance where they've had to fight their way through in the back of the grid. Obviously, 1 or 2 times for engine problems, but not on a consistent basis. So if Lewis Hamilton's at the front, which he is at the moment, let's say he is for next year, he starts at the back. You never know. Lewis Hamilton might head into a race weekend and think, I'm at the back for qualifying, and then I've got to fight my way through, which I'm in a Mercedes, it might not be a problem, probably not, I think I can do it, and he'll get a buzz from thinking, well, this like my, I'm excited to do this because it's a challenge. Tiamat Marduk, if you're watching, thank you for watching. If he does a lot of, back to front races, and obviously a lot of other a lot of other gamers do that, where they'll do like back to front tests, theoretical in Lewis Hamilton's shoes, but your theoretical, your kind of premonition is actually going to, happen next year, because we're finally going to be in a position where like that's actually going to happen. As I say, likewise, Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc, and it'll be a great test to see not just their out and out pace, but the skills of them getting through the field straight away, mind you, not just blue flags and things like that. The actual raw skills of the driver, and again going back to speed now might not be everything. If they're doing it at a track, so let's say that it works, and let's say that we do it for 2021, they might be at a track like probably, let's not say in Monaco, let's say Baku or Singapore or even Austria for like how short it is. If they're at one of those tracks, where speed doesn't really matter. Obviously, we all look at Red Bull, for example, loving the lack of speed tracks, because obviously their chassis and their aerodynamics are always really, really good. That might be a benefit to Ferrari and Mercedes, or it might hinder Ferrari and Mercedes, and it'll be a better battle. And hopefully other teams can get involved with it. Renault, Racing Point has things like that. Because, we've never seen... I know that obviously the low speed track we have is Monaco, and that's obviously got the most turns and the less straight, and they should be competing with Mercedes there. But there's never really been a test where it's been like Mercedes versus Renault. And in this, it might be, because, if Lewis Hamilton starts at the back of the grid, so Daniel is 10th, I think, in the World Championship, so that would mean he was 10th in the race. So then Daniel Ricciardo in 10th, Lewis Hamilton in 20th. What a great battle that would be. Lewis Hamilton would probably get there quite early, and then they'd have a battle to see basically who was the better driver, but not in blue flag conditions. And as I've just said, this would happen on a weekly basis in 2021. We would probably be sitting there and thinking, right, Lewis is probably going to get to P10 or P11 by lap 7. Daniel Ricciardo, because Daniel Ricciardo would probably want to move up places. They'll probably meet, quite early on in the race, halfway through the race, let's say. And that'll just be a fun battle to see. And every team will get the chance to battle Mercedes. Because it'll go Mercedes, then it'll go Ferrari, then Red Bull, then Renault, then Racing Point, then all these going all the way through the grid to then Williams. And then we'll finally have a Williams versus Mercedes like battle, which I think will be absolutely fantastic, because when's the next time Williams are going to battle Mercedes? So for that, I am like totally on board. I think this is such a really, really good idea. As I said, they're the trial in it. Ross Brawn, who of course is the he's very high up in the FIA, he's implemented this idea. I think the teams have, various obligations where they can kind of back out from it and things like that. Gunter Steiner at Haas is not on board with it at all. A few people aren't really supporting it that much, but it is going to go ahead. I think it's a great idea. I want to really know what you guys' opinions are, because as I say, there hasn't been loads of information. It's kind of been buried at the bottom of the pile, really. But I think this is really good, and I can't wait to see the tests. 3 races next year: France, Belgium and Russia. It should be really, really good. If you are going to those races, then it should be amazing to see that system. Again, obviously, if this is your first Grand Prix, then I think what a Grand Prix to go to. I mean, take it as a pinch of salt, because they are experimenting with it, but I do think it would be really, really good. And obviously, for somebody who has been to a Grand Prix before, obviously me and Jordan, if we went to one of those 3 races with the race, which, might be a possibility now, I think it would be really good to see, and we'll be judging it on how good, it works out to, qualify in the old way. It just means, though, that, as I've just said there, Q3, it's 10 minutes, I think. Is it 10 minutes? Yes. It starts off, 3 laps, 1 flying lap, and then they sit in the garage for 5, 6, 7 minutes. And you're like, especially if you're not looking at the pit lane, like if you're in, Maggots Beckett, for example, like we were in Singapore, Silverstone, and things like that, you're just standing there, looking at your watch and going, what's for tea? What are we doing tonight? And it's like, well, do you know what? I don't really want to talk about that. I hate Formula 1 tracks, weekends where you can hear yourself talk. Because you should never be able to hear yourself talk. For 2 reasons. One, because I don't want to talk to Jordan. I'm just joking. And second reason is because I want to be watching action. And with this sprint race, obviously until they, turn the corner, there'll never be a dull moment. And when it gets to halfway through the race, when obviously everyone's all spread out, it'll be constant. And then also you will get excited because you'll have seen that on the Saturday and you'll get ready for it on the Sunday as well. So I think it's a great idea. And also as well, it works to kind of copy and emulate Formula 2, because obviously Formula 2, as I just mentioned, have 2 races, obviously a sprint race and a feature race, one on the Saturday, one on the Sunday. It also might help the drivers coming through there. So obviously all the drivers that we have in Formula 2 at the moment, for example, like Mick Schumacher, Callum Ilott, Luca Giotto, that might get to Formula 1 one day, it will then help them because they won't go from 2 races to 1 race, which obviously people like Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, George Russell, Alexander Albon, they've all done. They'll go from 2 races in Formula 2 to 2 races in Formula 1. But obviously it's not just 2 classification races, it's a qualifying race and a race. I love this idea. I really, really do. It's absolutely incredible. So guys, make sure that you leave everything about this idea, leave it down in the description box. What do you think about the idea? Do you think it is a good idea? The simulation is George Russell on pole position, Lewis Hamilton at the back, and then lap 14 we might get a Mercedes versus Williams. I mean, how do you see it? Do you think that it'll help the team? Do you think it'll hinder the teams? How do you think it will work? How do you think it'll differ the World Championship standings? Because as I've just said there, everyone's going to be in reverse order. Do you think it'll help George get more points? Do you think Lewis will get less points? What do you think? It's a massive, massive topic. And of course, when Jordan's back on the show, we'll be talking about that obviously later on, most likely in next year's episodes, when obviously we get closer to the events and things like that. Hopefully also getting on other YouTubers' opinions, because it is a big thing, and it is definitely growing. Obviously another way to spice Formula 1 up. Not to say though that the qualifying now is not good, but I'll say it's just more of the lulls that we don't like in sport. Watching it on the telly, sometimes when there's a lull, it's like fair enough. Also, this is in practice as well, but also in qualifying, if there's a lull, fair enough, because then you're like right, I've got 3 minutes to go and get a drink. But when you're at the track, it's not good. You don't want to see a lull. You don't want to see the cars sitting in the garage. You don't want to see that. You want to see them on the track. You want to see constant. You want to see a Formula 1 car for the full. Well, in FP1, you want to see it for the full 90 minutes. It's not going to happen, but you want to see it for the full 90 minutes. I remember that when me and Jordan went to Silverstone, it was FP2. Final session of the day, final session on Friday. It started to rain, or it was already raining even, it was getting a bit drier. So the teams were not going out because they didn't want to go out on intermediate because it might have been too dry. They didn't want to go out on slick because it might have been too wet. They wanted to save the tyres, and of course they didn't want to risk anything like anyone spinning off, because that's a lot of times what happens when on a drying track. They test the limits and spin off. So they didn't go out for 30 minutes. Which if you're sitting at home, okay, fair enough, like you might think, it's not too bad. You know, it's FP2, obviously it's only a third of the session gone, but for somebody who, if we were sitting in Magnuson Becker, obviously, which is the other side of the track, seeing no action apart from having to talk to ourselves, which obviously I don't want to do. So then in that way it wasn't good. And this qualifying system just changes all of that to, as I say, constant action. So as I say, make sure to leave your comments down in the description box below. Can't wait to read them as well. It should be a good test. And obviously, do you agree with the test? Do you not agree with the test? And would it make you want to go to one of those races next year? Because I've said France, Belgium and Russia are the 3 races that are going to be getting this test for next year. And if all goes ahead, if they get 100% feedback or whatever, they get, you know, thumbs up, at least even 1 thumbs up from half the garage or from the fans, then they will go ahead with this. But as I say, better, much better than 2016 Australia, because it's now being tried. It's going to be tried. It's going to be tested, and I hope that the feedback is taken by the FIA from the fans, which obviously are a massive part of the sport, not just the drivers. And yes, hopefully it should be good. And if it is here in 2021, well, obviously, hopefully we'll look back and we'll say, well, there's been 3 successful tests in 2020, and I cannot wait. Formula 1 has been in some brilliant places around the world, visiting 6 of the 7 continents. Everywhere has been on the calendar, whether in previous times or up and coming on the calendar currently. We've been there for a few years, or we've been there for 30 years. Almost all parts of the world have been on our calendar, and that's what makes us such a good global sport. Now, there has been some tracks, as I've just said there, that have been on for a few years after spending loads on the track, for example, India and places like that. There's been tracks that we've been to for about 10-15 years, but not anymore, for example, like Sepang. And there's tracks, as I say, that we are going to go to in the future. Now, there's 2 massive races that are going to be on the calendar for 2020, obviously next year. The Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort, and of course the Vietnam Grand Prix in Hanoi. So these are 2 circuits that are coming on very different as well, quite polar opposites. So Zandvoort, which will be coming on around round 5 or 6 of the calendar, a very old-style school circuit, off-camber, things like that, a lot of run-off areas. Quite a small set, obviously fit for a lot of the 1980s cars of when obviously the Dutch Grand Prix was prevalent. It's been off the calendar for 20 or so years, but it's now finally coming back. And of course, after the massive support the Dutch fans have for Formula 1 for mainly one reason, which is Max. Not Red Bull, Max. It is going to be really good to see it back on. Now, obviously, it is going through renovations, but it is very much an old-style school circuit, whatever. But then the second one, of course, is the Vietnam Grand Prix. Coming in round 14 to round 15, going to Vietnam, obviously a country that we have never been to before. Again, extending Formula 1's reach in Asia. A long, high speed, high agility for the drivers. Street circuit in Vietnam, obviously very much different to Vietnam, but also going in the way forward for Formula 1, which is for street circuit or to revamp all circuits that have been on in the past, because they do want to have a repeat of what happened in, for example, India, which obviously is one of my favourite tracks. It's on the calendar for 3 years after spending one of the highest amount that they had ever spent on a Formula 1 track in a country, and I say they only visited for a few years. Sebastian Vettel of Red Bull holds the record at India, but that's not the record they want to have. The record is to be on the calendar still. But as I say, that's what Formula 1 is. Obviously, it's money, and it's obviously the demand for the tracks. Now, one of the countries that is massive on its sports and everything, and obviously a massive talker in the world, is the United States of America. Formula 1 has had a big relationship with them in the past. Now, we've been to Detroit, we've been to Dallas, we've been to Long Beach, we've been to Indianapolis, which obviously most prevalently in everything, I think when you think of USA, you think of Formula 1 at Indianapolis. And of course, we are currently at the Circuit of the Americas in Austin. And since the launch of Haas, the dedicated American Formula 1 team, there's been massive support for us in the state. And what I believe to be the 9th city to host a Formula 1 race, or an idea is anyway, is the Miami Grand Prix in 2021. Now, again, this is going to be half street circuit, half dedicated Formula 1 track, which is going to be run around their sports section in the city of Miami, predominantly around the Hard Rock Cafe Stadium, which is the home of the Miami Dolphins, the American football team in the NFL. And obviously this is going to be a big race to hopefully get more fans down in that part of the United States, obviously, which is Florida, and just spread their love of Formula 1 in all rounds. Now, I don't know what it's going to be called. It can't be called the US Grand Prix, of course, because that is the Circuit of the Americas. Probably just the Miami Grand Prix. It is set for 2021, and of course is to get a lot more fans there. Now, the US Grand Prix was a massive turning point for American Formula One. It had a big following in all the other races. Obviously, Dallas was, a really old, really loved track as well. Obviously, Detroit, what they say is the home of the American motor car. Obviously, Indianapolis got a lot of people out, but Texas, the Austin Grand Prix, the US Grand Prix in Texas brought so much revenue for Formula One. Haas, they were, it was finally asserted that they could call home. They had a lot of international support. They had a lot of people coming out to watch that, and of course, they brought things like IndyCar to the track there, and it's a massive motorsport pedigree. They want to spread that to another race, obviously implemented there for a race in 2021. Now, again, it's only an idea at the moment. Haas F1, Gene Haas and, of course, Gunter Steiner have pushed the idea. There has been a lot of ideas to race to have different races in the US. For example, they had one in New Jersey, which stood for quite a few years and then almost dropped off the face of the earth. Obviously, a street circuit around downtown New York, Manhattan, and obviously crossing into New Jersey. They've had other ideas as well, if you race in California and things like that, but this is the newest one on the list. So again, I'm not going to get too stuck to it because obviously it might change. Again, make sure to leave your comments down what you think about the race. Obviously, would you go there? Have you been to Miami? What's the place like? Have you not been to Miami? Obviously, what would you like to go? For example, I would love to go to watch the Miami Dolphins play, but Formula One being there is obviously just an added bonus for me. What do you think about this? Obviously, and is there another place you'd want to have Formula One in the USA? Again, just another track as well. Obviously, it makes it availability because, as you might know, I don't know if you might not know this, but America is a massive place. And for most people, actually the Canadian Grand Prix might actually be closer to them than the US Grand Prix might be. So, if you are in that corridor, like let's say, Georgia, place like that, South Carolina, where it's kind of, you're in that, zone of like, where do I go? Do I go up to Canada or do I go down to Austin? Where do I go? But then you got Miami on your door and you're like, oh, well, let's go there instead. Obviously, we don't know how lucky we are in the UK because even the top of Scotland is like sometimes... to go from Scotland, so I think Inverness to Silverstone was actually shorter than the distance to cross, Texas, for example. So again, we don't know how lucky we are, really. So yes, what do you think about that idea? Well, I think it's great. I do really think it's good. As I said in the first part of the episode, I love Formula One, bringing in these ideas, trying to, change a lot of things up. Obviously, give us a bit of a trial run like they can with the qualifying. These two races that have been implemented, obviously the Netherlands, great. We did say that they sort of need a bit of change, but obviously we have had that in the past, so that's good. We know what it's going to be like. Vietnam, we don't really know. It's going to be a bit of a test. For example, a bit like what Azerbaijan was when it first came on the calendar in 2016. Obviously, it turns out we absolutely loved that race. Or did we? I think we did. Yeah, we did. Well, obviously, it's still here, isn't it? So again, the Miami one will be a test. It's going to be half street circuit as well, which is good because obviously you don't have to put the banners up for the race. Hopefully they don't spend too much on it. And yeah, if there's going to be, very little hassle, just adding to their sport, adding to their pedigree, and obviously hopefully boosting tourism into Miami, then, it's only upsides, isn't it? Of course, it extends Formula One to exotic places like that, and hopefully we can get out to Miami to watch it, because obviously any new place is a good place to go to. Yes, so obviously make sure to leave your comments in the description about everything I've said in this episode. Thank you very much for watching. This is the end of the episode. Now, guys, listen, we are so close to 1,000. You need to basically be our friends right now and just help us get to there. I know people watch us that don't want to subscribe. You please need to help us. Just hit that subscribe button. We want to get to 1,000. We're so close. For something that we never thought we would do. We never thought we would get to 1,000. And we're finally there. We're at God's door. Oh my God, we're so close. So please, please, please help us out. Tell your friends about us. Any audience is great audience. Obviously, we love you guys watching us, leaving us comments. Obviously, they are improving. Thank you very much for all of that. Please help us out and subscribe. We really, really appreciate it. Because in the next few episodes, we should hopefully be saying thank you for 1,000. Stay tuned with us, obviously, for more 2019 and 2020 content as we head, obviously, to next season. And until next time, guys, I'll see you later.